This year, I set out to build the perfect website. I wanted to build and have something that was A, scalable, easy to manage and edit, but also that I had full control over and that wasn't dependent on any hosts or providers. And as I was building out the site, looking at optimizations and doing some research, I'd come across article after article about how Google and other tech giants are updating their algorithms to prioritize speed in the results. So it's no longer something that just impacts the end user. It's something that has a direct tie to your bottom line and revenue in the business. And it's not something that just I've found. It's something that every other web influencer in the space seems to be talking about.
Site speed is a ranking factor for both humans and for Google.
Amazon did a study and they found that every second delayed their website loads, they lose 1% of their revenue.
Google has probably told you that you need to eliminate render blocking resources on your WordPress site.
Did you know that a load time from 1 to 5 seconds increases the probability of a bounce rate to increase by 90%?
Site speed.
Speed up your WordPress website.
Websites, speed.
Speed optimization.
Make your WordPress website faster.
All right, Alex, we get it. Speed is important. The whole point of the video is walking you through how to build the entire site and make it load fast and scale with the business. So we're going to do this together step by step. In this first part, I'll be taking you through everything from setting up your server, a content delivery network, as well as installing and getting your site ready. And I'll be walking you through this step by step through a little share screen. So if you're an agency veteran or this is your first time building a website, don't worry, we'll go through everything together. You don't need any prior knowledge. Now, it's quite a long process. So before we get started, go grab yourself a coffee, shut down any social media or distractions you might have, buckle in, and let's dive in. We're gonna start by bringing up our trusty little notepad here and go through the different steps of our setup today. So together, we'll be doing 6 things today. We'll start off by setting up a website server and selecting which server best suits our needs. We'll then set up a CDN, which is a content delivery network and allows our website to be accessed at speed all around the world. And we'll get into more detail of what that means as we get to that section of the video. We'll then install WordPress and connect to our domain name, set up and configure WordPress so that it loads fast and works at scale, create our first little homepage, optimize the website, and finally we'll run it through a couple of tests to make sure that it's set up the right way and loads in the way that we want it to. Okay, let's get started. So there are 2 main types of servers that exist at the moment, or at least servers that we set websites on. There is fully managed servers, which is essentially sites or platforms that provide all the server management and setup for you. These are great because it's really easy and it takes a couple of clicks for you to purchase, install, and set up your website. Downside to that is that you don't have any access to your own server and there's very little that you can do to optimize, change it to best suit your needs. On the other hand, we have self-managed servers. These are by providers like AWS or Google Cloud, where you can go in, spin up your own server, configure it however you want. This is great because you have all the control. Downside is that it takes a lot of work to manage and continuously optimize. But we want the best of both worlds, right? So we're going to use something called Server Control Panel. And essentially what that does is it gives us all the ease of access that you would have with a managed provider like Cloudways or SiteGround, but with all the future control and optimizations and edits to your own servers as you would have with Google Cloud, AWS, Vultr, or any of the other ones out there. Now, there are many services that offer these control panels. The top 2 are probably GridPane and RunCloud. And for today's video, we're going to set a server up on RunCloud. So back into the screen, we're going to head over to runcloud.io and we are going to sign up for a new account. Now I'm just going to sign up with my Google login here, create your own username and password if you wanted to. And we're then prompted to create our very own first server. And we are going to do just that. So head over the big blue button here, connect a server, and you're going to be prompted with a bunch of different server options. And these are essentially the self-managed servers that I was talking about earlier. So there's quite a few providers. My top 2 favorites at the moment are Vultr, if you're looking for a more budget-friendly provider, or UpCloud, if you're looking for something that's a little bit faster, a little bit more optimized. For this video, we're going to go with Vultr. So we're going to select Vultr here. We're going to deploy a server automatically. It's going to be a native installation, and we want Open Lightspeed, which is my favorite type of server and, in my opinion, fastest that are currently on the market. It's then going to ask us to add an API key. We can see here that we don't yet have any API keys set up. So we're going to click on this Add API Key button, and it's going to ask us for the name of our API key, the API key token, and the RunCloud IP addresses we need for this integration. Now, as it's my first time setting up a server with Vultr, I'll have to go over to the Vultr website, create an account there, then generate the API keys and link back to RunCloud. Remember, what we're trying to do is use RunCloud for all the management and optimization and utility side of the server to keep it really easy, but use those self-managed server providers to have all of that flexibility and so that everything remains in my control. And we're going to do just that. So head over to Vultr, that's VULTR. See, it's popped up here on Google, and we are going to sign up for a new account. Same thing here, I'm just going to sign up with Google, and we're now in. Now, to launch Vultr servers, you first need to set up your billing details. So I'm going to fill in my billing information here, and I'll cut the video to the point that it's all filled out and ready to continue with the next step. Alrighty. Now with our billing set up, we're going to go and grab our API key. So you're going to hit your profile here, go over to API, and then enable the Vultr API. From here, you'll get your API key, which you can copy, jump back to your RunCloud server, and paste it into the personal access token area. And you'll also need to add the different RunCloud IPs that can access the server. So we're going to go back to RunCloud here, copy the IPs, jump back to Cloudways, and paste in settings here. Now you can see they're essentially the IP followed by the port. So we're going to get rid of 32 here, add 32 across, and we'll cut the rest for now. And we're going to repeat this process until we've covered all of the different IPs that need to be added on our Vultr server settings. Alternatively, you can also just allow all IP addresses. This is a little bit riskier. It's not something I've ever run into trouble with before, but it is your decision on whether you want to add the IPs individually or allow all IPs to access your server. Now, once we've finished adding our IP settings, we're going to jump back over to RunCloud, and we're going to first test the integration. You'll then see success. Your API key and secret key are functional and working, and we can then finalize by clicking the Add API Key button. Now that we've got our API key set up, we're going to go back to our connecting server page, make sure that we have those same options selected, so Vultr, Deploy Server, Native, and Open Lightspeed. This time we will select our API key and hit Continue. We're then prompted with selecting the type of server we want to spin up. So my preference at the moment is to use an Ubuntu 20.04. The plan, I like to use high frequency servers. Now, it's the same as if you're using a desktop computer with one of the older hard drives or an SSD. Do you want your server to run older hard drives or SSDs? Those high frequencies are running SSDs, so that's what we want to choose. So in this case, I'm going to choose Cloud Compute High Frequency. don't have a preference for Intel or AMD, so I'll just choose high frequency. I'm then going to select my data center region. Now for the region, I have a pretty simple rule. If it's a global site accessing global audiences, I'll choose a location that is as close to San Francisco as possible. I found that San Francisco works best when connecting to a CDN, which is what we'll be doing in the next step, and then serving a global audience. If you're just serving a local audience, I'd choose the place or the city that is closest to your audience. So if I was working with users, or if I had visitors looking at my website from London and the rest of the UK, I would then choose London as my data center region. In this case, it's going to be accessed globally by a series of users around the world. So I am going to choose Silicon Valley. We are then prompted to select the type of instance we want to run for our server. Now, this is essentially how much power your server has, and it's very similar to how much power your laptop or computer would have. It has a CPU, potentially a GPU, a hard drive, and an amount of transfer data that can go back and forth between that server. Now, keeping in mind that this does not mean that it's for one site only, right? Now that we have our own server, we can stack as many sites as we want on top of that server, provided we have the right amount of resources available for it to run smoothly for our users. In my case, I like to usually run something that has at least 2 cores, and then I'm pretty flexible on the memory, storage, and transfer data. Keeping in mind, you can always upscale or downscale pretty easily, given that we're using a service like RunCloud to manage our websites. So for this video, we're going to select an $18 a month instance that has 2 gigabytes of memory, 2 core CPU, and 80 gigs of storage. Last but not least, we give our server a name. Now, I like to keep my naming super simple, and I just call the server whatever platform it's on in the region it's in. And I do it this way in case later down the road I want to spin up more servers and I have them in different regions or with different providers. And that way it's really easy for me to figure out, okay, who was that with? What region was it in? What am I using it for? So given that in this case, our server is in the west of the US and it's with Vultr, I'm just going to call it USA West and Vultr. Then I just need to acknowledge and add the server. Now it can take 5 to 10 minutes for the server to provision and for all the setup to go through. So we're going to set RunCloud aside for a little bit while it provisions its server. And in the meantime, we are going to go and set up our CDN so that we're ready to connect to a global network. Now, a CDN, or a content delivery network, is essentially a set of servers that sit between you or the website visitor and your main server that we just set up with Vultr. The benefit behind this is that instead of me having to connect to your main server, which might be halfway across the world, I would connect directly to the content delivery network, which has servers all around the world so things load really fast. It's one of the pieces in our little website puzzle that has some of the most impact on speed and load times, especially for users that are far away from your core server. Just like website hosts, there are many CDN providers out there. My go-to is a provider called Cloudflare, which is, I believe, the biggest CDN provider on the market, and it has the most locations around the world. Bonus, it's also free. So we're going to jump in and set up a Cloudflare account. Now, when you go to the Cloudflare website, it looks like this. You'll first go and get started for free. Go through the account setup. In my case here, I'm just going to log in to my existing account. Once you're logged in, you want to add a new site. Now, you're going to enter your website name. We are going to use a site called The Collective. So the collective.so. Add the site. And we're then prompted with the usual, hey, can you pay for us? But Cloudflare has an awesome free plan, which is really all we need to build a website. So we're going to select the option here, free. Continue. It's then going to scan for our different DNS records, and it does this in case you have an existing website that you want to then move onto Cloudflare. You may have set up a bunch of settings around your security and emails, and if you have, you don't need to re-enter all those DNS settings. Cloudflare will just scan for them and import them automatically. Once that's done, we can click continue, and it will then ask us to point our name servers to Cloudflare. Now, what this is doing is essentially removing the control of the DNS settings from your domain registrar. So companies like GoDaddy, Namecheap, wherever you registered your domain, and it's giving that control over to Cloudways. This is a requirement to be able to use the CDN network. Don't worry though, you're the only person who will be able to make changes to your DNS settings when you're logged into your account. So you can see here, log into our registrar, remove any of the existing name servers and add Cloudflare's name servers. So we're going to do just that. Now, I purchased my domain name through Namecheap, so I'm going to head over to Namecheap, but it doesn't really matter which provider you're with. The process is pretty much exactly the same. You just need to find where your name server settings live. So we're going to log in here and jump over to our account. Select the domain that I want to edit or point to our Cloudflare CDN network. So for ours, it was this one here, the collective.so. And then you can see here under name servers, you'll have DNS options. Now, I've already switched them over for the video, but you'd essentially switch from whatever the default your domain provider has to a set of custom DNS or custom name servers. You're then going to put in 2 name servers provided by Cloudflare. So if we go back to our Cloudflare page, see here, add Cloudflare's name servers. And we've got 2, Donna and Jake. So I'm going to click to copy Donna, chuck that one in, and then click to copy Jake and chuck that one in. From there, just save, refresh, and you're good to go. Then jumping back to Cloudflare, we can then go done, check name servers. Will then prompt us to do a quick start guide. For now, we can just finish this later. We're not going to use many of the settings, but we'll configure them when we get to the optimization phase of the video. Now, name server changes and DNS changes can take up to 72 hours. In most cases, they go through within the first couple of hours. There has been time that I've switched them my domain name provider. It's taken a whole day before the site is actually updated and Cloudflare has picked up we have correctly switched over to the Cloudflare name servers. There's no way around this. It's purely up to your domain provider and how fast they execute that change. So just allow for a little bit of time if you are working towards a deadline. Now, we have one last step with our Cloudflare CDN setup. That is integrating it back into RunCloud. So you're going to go back to your RunCloud server settings, and by now the server should have correctly installed and it should be all set up. And we're going to go into our account settings page. And if you scroll down here, you'll see an integration tab. So click on that, and we want to integrate Cloudflare, which is the first one at the top of the list. We'll add the integration, and it's going to ask us for 3 things. A name, just call it Cloudflare RunCloud. The email that you use for your Cloudflare account, and your API key. Now, to get your API key from your Cloudflare account, just jump back to Cloudflare, click on your profile, and on the left-hand side here, you have API tokens. So we're going to click on that. We are then going to use our global API key. Now, I'm not going to reveal my key to everyone in the video, but all you need to do is enter your password, and then it will display your API key and you can go ahead and copy it. Once you've got your key, jump back to RunCloud and paste it under the API token. With your key and your email in place on RunCloud, you can then test the integration. Once it gives you all the green lights, you can then save it and we can continue to the next step. That's everything done for our Cloudflare CDN integration to get our site accessed from everywhere around the world. Now, Before continuing, let's do a real quick recap of what we've got set up so far. All right, recap time. By now, we've set up 3 crucial parts to our online business. We have first set up our own hosting server. We did that with Vulture, and that's where all of our files and all of our future websites will live and sit upon. We have set up our CDN network, which is what allows users from around the world to access our site really, really quickly without having to load files all the way from the original server. And we've set up a control panel on RunCloud, which is both integrated to our main server as well as our CDN, which will allow us to A, build this website, but even in the future, we don't need to do this whole setup anymore. We have everything done to continue to build additional websites and really scale our online business. In the second part of the video, we're going to cover 3 additional points. We're going to deploy our first website through our control panel on RunCloud. We are then going to set up our first landing page, or our homepage. And then last but not least, we're going to optimize that site and run a couple of tests to see how it performs against a lot of the other websites that are out there. All right, let's dive in. So we're now ready to deploy our very first WordPress website. Now to do so, we're going to go back to our RunCloud dashboard. And now you'll see your new server provisioned, and it'll have a little green light beside it, meaning it's connected and all ready to go. What we'll do next is click on Web Applications on the top left-hand corner here, deploy a new web app, select our server that we have, and go deploy. Now for configuration, we're going to go with one-click, WordPress. We can name our application. I'm just going to call it whatever my site name is. So in my case, The Collective. I will use an existing user because I don't want to create a new RunCloud account. I'm going to use my own domain. So that is thecollective.so. And I don't want to enable www. I just want it to be thecollective.so. For DNS integration, I am going to select our Cloudflare integration. And I'm then going to select the API key that we configured. It'll give us then a little, yep, all connected message. And this will allow RunCloud and Cloudflare to speak to each other and do all the SSL and DNS and domain name mapping without us having to jump in and configure anything. So I want to allow the DNS integration here with Cloudflare. Then for Auto SSL, I'm just going to select Advanced because I want every site on my server to have a different SSL certificate, so they each have their own one. And I'm going to enable Auto SSL. And what this means is if the certificate ever expires, it will automatically generate a new one. Scrolling down a little bit, I've then got my WordPress settings. Now for my site title, I'm just going to call this The Collective. These settings can be changed at a later date as well, so nothing that you're doing here is going to be set in stone. My admin username, password, and email are the username, password, and email I'm going to be using to log in to my new website. So in my case here, I'm just going to put my email, but I'd suggest, if possible, not using the words admin or anything very obvious as an admin user login, just to prevent a little bit of brute force people trying to hack into your websites. From there, you can then select your canvas. And this is if you've prepared and saved any templated WordPress websites, you can quickly deploy them with all the existing configuration done. As it's a brand new account on RunCloud, I don't have any canvases, so I'll leave this empty. Do I want this to be a WordPress multi-site? In my case, no, I do not want it to be. I would say unless you plan on using a multi-site, do not enable multi-site. It's a whole other beast that we can cover in another video. Do I want Lightspeed cache? Yes, I do want Lightspeed cache. And do I want to enable two-factor authentication? For me, in this case, I'm going to leave it off, but for you, I'd recommend having two-factor authentication turned on, and I'll let you go through that setup. Then for database options, I'm going to leave this blank because I want it to be all of the default. And basic settings, public path, same thing, leave it as it is. And PHP version, I like to use PHP 8. I find all of the plugins and tools that I use work well on PHP 8. I will move to PHP 8.1 and 8.2 as everything else becomes optimized, but there's no rush at this stage, so I'm going to go with PHP version 8. It will give us a warning that some plugins or features might not be fully available, and you will see some of the plugins, especially the older ones that haven't been updated, do break when you upgrade the PHP version. But again, in our case, we're only using plugins and tools that are actively being developed and used. Once you've completed all the details here, you can go on the bottom right hand side and click deploy. I mean, it's deploy the collective because that's my site name, but it will be deploy whatever your site is called. Once again, just like when we initiated the server for the first time, it takes a couple of minutes for this site to deploy. So hit the button, go grab a coffee, and come back in a couple of minutes. So our site has now been installed. You can see it's here under your web applications. If you click on it, you can see all the different configs and settings, and we'll go more in depth into these in a future video, customizing a site. But for now, we want to log into our website. So we're going to go top right hand corner over here, open site. And we're going to type in the default /wp-admin. And this will take us to our login page. Now on this page, you'll enter your username and password that you put in our previous step. So in my case, I used Alex as my email for my username, and then a password that was generated by the system. Hit login, and there we go, we're in. So that covers everything from setting up our server, our CDN, and installing our first website. In part 2, which will be a separate video, we'll be covering everything from setting up your own landing pages or website pages, configuring them to be well optimized, doing an entire site optimization, and then publishing it and getting ready to rank on Google. Subscribe down below if you want to tune in for the second part of the video. Let me know if you have any questions so far down below in the comments. Leave a like if you think it was pretty good, and otherwise I'll catch you in the next one.